All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Democratic Convention Week Town Hall here on Tennyson Street. Thanks to everyone who came before and everyone who's new. And we're going to try to keep this to an hour because our convention is starting online tonight at 8 o'clock. And Linda Woolard, who she and I are rocking our Kamala Harris for the future. Linda is going to be involved in many convention things, so we're going to get started. But I'm going to tell y'all about a couple of things that are happening this week, and then I'm going to give you a little background on my four wonderful guests, so that way when they chime in, especially my seatmate, you know who's talking. Hey, Tammy, you know who's talking, what's going on. So a couple quick things for everyone watching. Y'all know vote by mail and expanded voting rights is something we've been working on all year. And this morning we received Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin's, or as I call him, Secretary Kyle. We got his emergency plan, and it is regressive, in my opinion. It is not as expansive as last time's plan. The early voting days, we only have 10 early voting days instead of, I think, 2 weeks. The reasons to vote by mail are very restrictive. You can only request the ballot for the typical reasons of being like over 65 or if you are positive for COVID. I don't know how they're going to check that or where that information is going to say or what. Yeah. So we don't like that plan at all. There is currently a lawsuit in federal court in Baton Rouge challenging a bunch of things about voting here, and I'm sure they're going to amend it to add information on this plan. But Wednesday, the House Government and Affairs Committee is having a hearing at 10 a.m. And you can check my Facebook or social media or Marcel's Facebook, and Nicole's gonna put it in the chat for where you can call or email about expanding voting rights. And you can also watch it online at 10, and we'll have a link for that too. But please encourage your networks to call and say, like, y'all, this is ridiculous. Over 40 states have expanded absentee voting, and they just have a lot more easier options. Like if Nicole was sick and or just if she wasn't here and she wanted me to drop her ballot off because it was Wednesday of the week of the election and she didn't trust the post office, I couldn't do it because I was a family member and you have to sign an affidavit. It's too many rules.
Right.
So we're going to do that. That's Wednesday, and you're welcome to watch it. We have the convention this week. Linda's going to talk about. And what everyone's asking also is, are we getting more federal money for whether it's unemployment or housing or anything? And I don't know. No one knows. Our state unemployment fund is almost out of money, which means we're going to have to start borrowing money. It's getting pretty precarious, and everyone's on pins and needles about it. But you will hear from me as soon as we know more. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give a very brief intro of my four guests, and then we're gonna go back to Linda. So I'm gonna start with my seatmate, Tammy Phelps from Shreveport, District 3.
Hello.
And when I
Hi,
say
everyone.
seatmate, when I say seatmate, we literally, our desks are connected. We talk all day long.
Yes.
Tammy was former school board member for a long time. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, school board, and we're both new, and we both have really tight races, and we both let our voices be heard a lot in the House. So we have a lot to say. Then we have Lakeisha Jefferson, who, like me, is an Emerge alum. She is a longtime lawyer, family lawyer, and she's running for family court this year, and she has quite a few things to tell us as well. Then Nick Reed, our special male guest. We always have to include one guy. Nick is a good friend of Nicole and I, and he's a local business owner. You've probably seen the bike rides around the city with all the lights. Nick and his partner have that company, and they also own Culture Park. And what's the other place? Bar Culture. And he's going to tell us a little bit about those. But then off to Linda, because Linda, you're going to talk to us first. Linda is just a mentor to so many of us. She's worked in politics for so long, and she worked on the ground. And when I say that, like phone banking and running campaigns and knocking doors and like all the hard work that you don't see, that's what Linda does. And she has talked so many of us through a lot of growing pains. and she's involved in the convention this week, and she is running for, is it first vice chair?
Vice chair, yeah.
Vice chair, sorry, of the state party. And when I tell you we desperately need someone who understands groundwork in charge, like it blows my mind that we might have people in charge who haven't actually been on the ground in a campaign, because nothing compares to field work. So
Right.
Linda, tell us a little bit about why and how you got to understanding how important field was, and how are we going to do that this year when we're all talking to each other on the computer screen? Take it from here.
So my entrance into politics really came with Barack Obama, which was hot on the heels of Katrina and the flood of New Orleans, where as we were trying to rebuild the city, it became really evident to me that without federal funds and an ally in the White House, we just weren't going to rebuild. So I got involved with the Obama campaign, and they were all about field work, all about organizing, all about neighbors talking to neighbors, and the premise that your neighbor trusts you more than they trust the average person that they don't know, or just the average news person on TV, that they're really going to trust you. So that's really kind of where I started learning that work. And I was with the Obama campaign for 6 years. So, I mean, it just got ingrained in me as someone that just did that work over and over and over. I mean, to me, it was just the best university for organizing you could go to. That's really what I would call it. So I have been paying attention this year. So yeah, I've been promoting field work and grassroots organizing, door knocks, phone calls, texting, any kind of organizing, person-to-person conversation for the last 14 years. And now we find ourselves in a pandemic where we really can't do some of those in-person things. Obviously, we can still do phone calls and we can still text, but the door knocks are off the table. Holding town halls or rallies or any kind of event, we're just not able to do this year. So I've been, any kind of webinar or conference call or anything the Democrats or the candidates have held over the last few months, I've tried to get on just to find out how they're going to be managing organizing when you can't go door to door. And the only folks who are really still trying to do door-to-door stuff are like census workers who actually have to get things filled out, and it's complicated business. Figuring out how to use one-use pens and, buying vats of hand sanitizer and, masks by the gross, et cetera. So the Biden campaign in particular has really focused on digital organizing. They've invested heavily in that. They've invested in training people on how to use phones. And they're switching right now from just regular phone bank phones to those predictive dialer calls, which are faster. You get a lot more contacts. So they're really just looking to ramp up the number of conversations people can have. So through phone calls and texts, a lot of stuff that's happening online, they're very much encouraging the use of like Facebook groups, because Facebook really, while it was starting to kind of see a little bit of a decline prior to COVID coming along, it really had a resurgence. Everybody went online. So they're very much encouraging people to get on Facebook groups and kind of organize that way. And then they're using this relational organizing tool. Some of the other campaigns that have used it in the past might recognize it by the name of Reach. But it's an app that you can download called Vote Joe app. I think that's right, Vote Joe. There were two. That's what it confuses me. It used to be Team Joe, and now I think it's Vote Joe. But basically, people have been trying to push relational organizing for a while now, and there's been a little bit of a hurdle to it, but I think people are getting more into it now since we can't knock doors. It's basically, you're not calling people you don't know. You're not texting people you don't know. You're using your own contacts in your cell phone and you're reaching out to those people. And you get to choose who you want to talk to. So if it's like Joe the plumber that comes to fix your toilet, who you know is going to vote for Trump, that's not someone you're going to call, right? You're wanting to contact people who know you and trust your word, so that when you contact them and say, hey, I'm doing this work and I feel very strongly about us getting together and online, digitally, wherever, but, just making sure we're doing the work of turning voters out this year. So you can invite people to vote for Joe. You can invite people to, text Joe to 30330, I think is the text number to start getting texts from him. And you can just ask them if they want to volunteer as well. But there's an action center. If you go to joebiden.com, there's an action center where you can sign up for different trainings for all these things, for the app, for the phone calls, for the texting. And I would highly recommend that because there's a learning curve to some of this stuff. So I would certainly recommend people going to do that. And the one thing I'll add also that I didn't really touch on that was really talked a lot about earlier in this year that's kind of gone by the wayside. People were looking at their field budgets for their campaigns and thinking, well, since we can't knock doors and maybe people don't really want us dropping lit off to them, we'll invest more in mail. Well, now because they're really kind of messing with the post office, campaigns are now having to go back and rethink about that again and say, well, do we want to invest in mail? Because we can send out mail pieces that never get to anyone or get to people after election day, and that's sort of a waste of money. So that's a whole other piece. But the digital organizing too, I will say one thing that Joe Biden has done has actually, for the first time ever, has invested more money in Facebook ads and digital ads. He's outpacing Donald Trump on those investments, and I think that's a positive thing.
Good. So I'm going to put one thing on the side for when we get to Lakeisha about canvassing during COVID, because she and I have a little bit to say about that. But I want to ask you something, and I'd like to get Nick's opinion on it too. So you just talked about the procedure of reaching people this year, that it's going to look a little different digitally. But I want to talk about substance for a minute. So last year, the governor, he had to go into a runoff, and a lot of us, myself included, you included, we were like, you can't just do the same thing you have to do. You're not touching voters. And there was, how did Tammy get on my screen? Tammy, you just got on my screen somehow. I don't know how.
Here.
Sorry. Anyway, so there were some changes in the campaign last year because we felt like he wasn't touching voters. He wasn't touching New Orleans. He wasn't touching Black voters enough. He wasn't touching young voters enough, people who turn out for him. So if you could, for like a couple of minutes, talk about what changed then. And Nick, I'm wondering, since, you're newer to being involved politically, did you notice a difference as a voter last year from the governor's race, from the primary to the runoff, or was it all the same to you? Let's start with Nick, actually. Linda, you can tell us after what you did.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, and I do want to point out that the national races are a little bit different than the local, and there probably are some kind of organizing things that you can do locally that might be a little easier. I think Biden's campaign is really focusing more in 5 or 6 battleground states. So Louisiana is unlikely to be a state that's going to get a whole lot of attention for groundwork. As far as the governor's race, there was a big push from community groups who had already been kind of organizing, but realized they need to ramp up their efforts since there was sort of a vacuum. There was not groundwork being done from the governor's team, despite my best efforts. There just wasn't, we really weren't getting the funding for it. And I know that a lot of the community groups were recognizing that, their communities really were the most vulnerable communities, and they had a big investment, not necessarily in the Democrats winning and not in John Bel Edwards specifically winning, but they understood the difference between a John Bel Edwards governorship and an Eddie Rispone governorship. And they really wanted to make sure that we got John Bel Edwards reelected. Protecting the Medicaid expansion was really important to folks. And certainly the disabilities community knew that they had a lot to lose. So yeah, there was the Power Coalition, Step Up Louisiana.
Did y'all change the focus from the primary to the runoff, and how you were doing, and how you were touching people and what you were doing?
Say that again?
Did you change the focus, the everyday of what you were doing and how you were doing? Because I want to see if Nick can remember from last year, And Lakeisha, frankly. Tammy, you were not in New Orleans.
So for me
Right.
personally, right, I had been working with community groups on just constituency outreach because we weren't picking up the field piece. So I'd already had those connections
So you
to
just
them. They really did. Huh?
You just increased that.
Yeah. So right. So they knew they had to raise their own money and do their own field work for that runoff because they did not see that work happening and they did not feel comfortable leaving this to chance. So they all stepped up their own efforts. Together, Louisiana came in. There was this groups. I wrote a piece for the Bayou Brief on this about the vast number of community groups that stepped up mostly on their own dime, of their own accord. There were some light coordination and light contact between them, but most of them just knew their own communities and knew who they needed to speak to. So they set about to work to make sure that they were knocking those doors, making those calls, sending those texts. For me, I did shift from doing constituency outreach in the primary to early vote. I worked on we targeted voters who had early voted in the past, but did not early vote in this primary. So we really did a full court push on those folks, and we were trying to reach them. That was a smaller group of people, but we did a full court press on them and made sure that they turned out to early vote for the runoff, because sometimes people don't turn out as much for the runoff as the primary elections. They forget that there's another election to go. So we increased those numbers huge amounts for the runoff. So that was something that we really saw uptick, and we were doing that by texting, mailing, phone calls, any way that we could contact them. And that was not just in the cities, that was rural areas also.
Okay.
So we just had a very targeted group of people that the John Bell campaign and that I was charged with targeting. But in the meantime, what we saw was those community groups just stepping up and doing the work in their own communities. It was very phenomenal. The thing is, and that I've tried to kind of explain to some of the political folks and the Democrats in particular, as we're looking to elect new leadership, they're not going to organically, naturally do that every election. So we can't leave that to chance and just say, somebody's going to turn up and do that work for us. They felt very much motivated for their communities to make sure John Bell Edwards got reelected because of what his candidacy and his governorship represented. That's not something Democrats can count on over and over again. We also need to develop our own field strategies.
Sorry, I'm behind a little bit on the time, so I need to move on a little bit. No, stick around unless you have to go. But Nick and Lakeisha were in New Orleans with me, and depending on what we all saw last year, what did y'all see on the ground for the huge push that ended up getting the governor $100,000 more votes in New Orleans? Because something we're struggling with internally in the party is how to grow as a party and how to reach more voters. And to a lot of people like me, you got to touch your young people, your people in the cities. And they did it last year. They squeaked it out. But what do y'all remember seeing? And then we're going to move on a little bit to what do you think is totally missing, and who is being missed? And Nick, let's start with you because you were about to talk a minute ago.
Okay, so I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I kind of recently just started paying attention to the
That's
political
great.
movement.
Yeah.
I probably couldn't tell you much about what I remember about the push from the governor's race, but I will say, and I will also say that from on the surface side for us, for like a lot of people that in our community, maybe people that come to the bike rides, I think for us is that we were always under the perception that just the presidential election was the only important thing. So for us, we never really paid attention to the local different elections and whatnot. So I think right now, because of everything that's going on, now I'm starting to help educate people and educate myself to realizing that it's the whole totality of everything that helps out. So I can't really respond to it as far as knowing exactly what the push was last year.
Did you remember much of, did it I know you remember it. Obviously, there were signs and stuff everywhere. But do you felt like the campaign really reached out to like you and your friends and the people who
No,
go to your bars?
no, not at all.
What okay, hold that. Lakeisha, tell me what you remember last year, because you were already in Emerge and already involved in a different way. And then I want to ask y'all a little more about where you think, you know, communication is missing or where it's wrong. But first, what do you remember from the fall?
I saw lots and lots and lots and lots and lots, and I'm not exaggerating, lots of meet and greets, like especially targeted meet and greets for
Okay.
young professionals in particular. So I know
I saw you
personally,
there.
yes, I personally got like at least once or twice a week another meet and greet invitation from the JBA team. So all in all, I think I must have been on about maybe 20 of their list for just different targeted groups they were looking for. I'm an attorney, so I got, I'm sure the attorney invite, I got the young professional invite, I got the Black woman invite. Like I literally was getting for months leading into the runoff, at least 2 or 3 emails a week from the JBA team on meet and greets and fundraising as well. And so I remember thinking at one point, I was like, look, JBE, that's just enough.
No more money.
Time. But yeah, lots of, which I thought was very effective for him, you know, the meet and greets in particular, because every time I went to a different meet and greet for him, I honestly did meet different people. And so I think that that was very effective for him. I think that, you know, in addition to the field work that he was obviously doing in New Orleans, those meet and greets, I think were golden for him. You know, if you want to say, I think that's really a form of field work, to be honest with you, because I think it, you know, yeah, I mean, it's a targeted group. And he got a lot of excitement and encouragement from younger people. So that, I mean, that's what I saw, you know, for him in particular for that race.
Well, it's interesting because I got a lot of that too, and it seems like, you know, with the push like electronically and the push now, there's a risk of touching the same people over and over again, and like you know, people who, whether they're older or aren't as computer literate, aren't going to get touched as much. But I'm really curious about, you know, Nick's demographic. Like Nick is, how old is Nick, like 30? Younger. I won't ask how old you are. I know you're younger than me. You're definitely not 30ish. You're definitely not, you know, our grandma. Like you're definitely like computer savvy. I mean, you're like famous on Instagram.
Oh.
Let's fast slide. Yeah. Like you're, you know, all over social media. You're someone who should have been touched like just as much as Lakeisha and me. Clearly you touch so many people on social media every week. Why do you think they're missing you, and what do you think, I guess, how should I say, how are you reaching people through media that you think the I guess mainstream isn't? I don't know if that's the right word. Mainstream politics, mainstream government.
Well, I think the key is that for us in the bikes, we kind of bring together a multi-generational like event every Tuesday. And with that, we have teenagers all the way to 50-plus-year-olds. So there's not too many things you could do in the city that could catch that wide of a range. But I also think that the reason why they might not always get to us is because some of these people are not like computer literate and savvy. So even when
even though you are.
Yeah, even though I am. But some of these people that come to our bike rides, they might not even follow us. They have people, a lot of people may follow the movement, but our core group of people that actually attend the bike rides every Tuesday may or may not be those people that's actually on the internet. And even if they are, they might just have a page, but they're not like savvy with it like me and you maybe, you know? But I think that, you know, that's one of the reasons why we started the We Ride Together Bike for Change initiative. with the bikes, where every Tuesday we have someone that comes and talks to the community, the bike community, and just give out some information. If it's about the census, voter registration, or if a candidate wants to come and speak and get their message out. Because I mean, right now we're riding with at least 400 people safely.
Can I ask him a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
How are you recruiting members for your bike ride?
Well, I actually have Nicole helping me, and I put it out on internet. I put it out on social media that anybody who wants to come talk, just DM me or text me, and then from there we go from there. So we try to get at least 1 or 2 every week. So even if fitness,
your
anything,
bike riders, where are they coming from?
I mean, like I said, the age range is from teenagers to 50 plus, and everybody is local. But a lot of people, maybe people that just come and visit for the week and they're in town. We have a lot of people that might be transplants from other cities, and people tell them this is the first thing they should do when they get here, because they get a good view of the city, and it's a good way to network as well, because at the end of the day, I had a lot of people that came and got jobs, job offers, or meet people. It's a social gathering, as well as you can take care of business as well. So it's the demographics. They have people come from Slidell. We've had people come from Baton Rouge to do the ride on Tuesdays as well. So you just never know what you're gonna get, really.
It sounds like you've done a really good job at using the social media to get the word out, and then letting other people bring their family and friends, like their aunt or uncle. That's that's a really natural way of doing things. Instead of just throwing a bunch of money into one thing, you're just kind of letting it grow, but you have time to do that.
And you know what? It's also organic, so it works. So when the people come out there and they see the message, it's not like we're forcing it on them. It's kind of like they just kind of seeing it within the realm of what's going on, and they're paying attention. And then it's like, okay, let's go ride, let's go. And it's also helps out with health and all that as well.
Yeah, no, they're great ideas. I've been on a few, and they're good. Has the response to the speakers been overall positive?
Yes. At first, the first couple times that we tried it, they weren't paying attention enough. I felt like it was kind of like, I probably wasn't I wasn't organized and ready for it. But I think now that we finally have a space at the French Market every Tuesday, 7:00 now, and we have a structure towards it, I feel like now it's serving its purpose of what it's meant to be.
Cool. She hasn't talked yet, so I'm bring Tammy in for a second before Lakeisha and I get back. But Tammy, although you're in Shreveport, your part of the state is a lot more rural than where we're from. And honestly, I have no idea what field or out looks like in Shreveport. Is it on the ground in the city and then lots of TV? Or do you have, I know you are starting to have bike ride companies, because my colleague Royce told me his cousin has a bike company in Shreveport. So I know things like that are starting up here, but what are you seeing that how people are starting to, not just with campaigns, but like Nick is doing to just expand, messaging in the community?
I like to say I love that idea, Nick, and I was sitting here taking ideas because I love to ride my bike as well. And there have been other bike riding clubs for fitness, so they have been going on for some time. But I love the idea of gathering for a cause, in a sense, and I can see that growing here. And I'm just thinking, okay, I have all these neighborhoods. How can I get these neighborhoods together? I just had someone today say, well, how can we, as it relates to school, how can I become more active in assisting parents and navigating through the system with school starting? So we're thinking about tents. You can't really have, a lot of gatherings, but we want to do that outside. I may be one of the first. We haven't done a lot here, I would have to say that. The market is just so different. Because some districts, as you know, have to do hardly anything to have their communities engaged. And I think I am, one of the few that it's time to, get outside the box and really try to engage the community. We mentioned the census earlier. even the voting time. Those are the two priority top things on my list. I just spoke with a volunteer today. She actually got our newsletter today. So I don't know when have your communities receive yours, but my community did receive the newsletter today. That was really uplifting. Just for her to say, I'm ready, you know, how can I get involved with you to get the word out for even almost begging some of our constituents, you know, to turn in their census, since that's sort of where we are now, that's low across the state. So I haven't seen a lot, just to answer your question, but I will be trying to really think outside the box and really get some help from, I have like 10 or more communities in my district, and everybody's sort of territorial. But again, one of my goals and something that I ran on was even though everybody, even though you're in your community, but we're still one district and we're still one city. Right. So even outside of the crime that we have going on now, Nick, that may be one of the challenges. So, and I'm thinking, you know, how to get the police involved and, you know, have safety for whatever we decide to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough reaching everyone. And, you know, I went through this last year that I was determined not to do what people call 2-track or 3-track your messaging when you're saying different things to other people. Because for me, in my little district, it was important that I was always the same person. But when you have a large race, a statewide race, even a parish-wide race, you got to think about everyone you're talking to, and make sure that you know you're reaching them. And so something I want to come to with Lakeisha. So she's running this year, and I just had a friend run, and my field director worked on the last one and on this one, and they sort of found a little way around not canvassing. Sorry, sorry. They found a little way around canvassing by starting to do lip drops. And for those of you who've ever worked on a campaign, they're not the favorite of any field organizer because you're generally not speaking to a person. But because of COVID, there's a lot of people outside their house right now. And Lakeisha, I know you started a little bit with that. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in what was supposed to be lit dropping, but ends up with porch chats?
I don't like it. I like the traditional way of doing things where you're actually touching people and talking to them. And so, you know, this is very challenging, actually, to try to figure out more creative ways to get around, you know, the no contact issue, you know, because quite frankly, people, you know, contrary to popular belief, they don't want to have contact. I mean, that's just been my experience. They don't want to come out of their houses, you know, and to the extent that maybe, you know, if they're doing yard work and maybe you kind of catch them, that's really about the extent of it. I think that you've just got to, in this environment, find more creative ways, because that's really just not a possibility right now, to be honest with you. And to tell you whether or not, or like how successful I think lit drops are, I don't really know. You know, I don't know that I think that they're very effective, but I'm certainly not an expert to tell you that they don't work. I'm just saying I think that you've got to find some more creative ways besides that, because traditional canvassing is just, I believe, the better way to go. But to the extent that you can't do that, I think, you know, I think some of the things that Linda talked about earlier, you know, as far as what the Biden team is doing, I think you just got to think about ways, you know, and I certainly, you know, and I'll tell you that campaigning in New Orleans is very different, right? And so to the extent that, you know, and so to the extent that I think that everything that Biden is doing in other states is going to work here, Linda can certainly tell you that that's just not going to be the case, you know. But I think that thinking outside of the box in that regard, as far as the revamping that the Biden team has done, I think is the better way to go. And I think that's just what you have to do. I mean, we certainly have had to, you know, talk with my team over and over again about different ways to reach people in this environment. And quite frankly, you just got to do what you got to do, you know?
What,
And that's strange. Oh, go ahead.
no, go for it.
Oh, I was just gonna say when you were saying things that may work here may not work, in other states. I remember visiting an elderly voter a couple of times, and I think the second time her daughter was visiting from Atlanta, and I had met her mom before, so going the second time, coming to tell her about the runoff, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, you're knocking on the door and really talking to someone that would never go in Atlanta." So at one, but she's from Louisiana, she's from Shreveport. One, she was so glad to see it, but two, knowing that doesn't work everywhere, for whatever reason, either they don't come or for other safety reasons.
Well, so
which was pre-COVID.
Right. But you raised something that, so this is very different per city, per community, per candidate. Is there historically, obviously all over the South has been a lot of church campaigning. And that was very difficult for me last year because I grew up Catholic and I no longer go to church. And so that was something that was difficult for me because it is not a daily part of my life. But for many people it is regularly. So you have here now people can't attend church
Right.
in general. So they're missing that, but then you're missing that. And I know Lakeisha, you are very active in the church, and Tammy, I think you did a lot of that last year too. So, what are y'all seeing? Like how are your churches adapting and, in terms of reaching their members, and then how do you think that's going to affect voting and outreach and messaging and filling out the census and how to tell people to vote by mail? All of those things are going to be more difficult because you won't be in the church. Tammy?
Sure. You're absolutely correct, because that is very, I would say, a big part of the African American community. Going to church, having faith in their pastor to allow a candidate to come in to speak, and asking for their vote, introducing yourselves, as it relates to the census as well. That was sort of a leader in the community. Very, very difficult now. But thankfully, some churches have become creative with social media. There were some in park and praise in their parking lots. Some have been getting others to run their social medias. They've been getting it. They've been getting out there, but not actually operating it. So, and I think that's all of the pastors that I know have really been looking forward to doing something different. So they have continued to have some type of communication with their congregation. And again, I'm concerned about the turnout, even for the census of where we are. Just speaking to someone today, as well as the vote. I think maybe, hopefully, the country can speak. Actions have spoken and will speak for themselves of what we're actually dealing with for people to go out and vote. I don't know if some of you remember the time when, or maybe heard of, when David Duke ran. I'm hoping we would have lines like that outside.
I remember, yeah.
Area. That would be great to see. But
well, how do you remember that working? I was I'm a little bit younger than you. I think you would have been in high school then. What do you remember about? Because that was pre-internet. How did they get people out?
Oh yeah. And that's what I meant by just the action speaking for itself. Yeah, you just heard about it. You just knew about it. Of course, there was no social media and all of that then. You may have heard your family members talking about it. You definitely heard your community talking about it. People may have watched the news more then, but it was in the know. And it was, enough to just get people out to vote. That was just not going to happen here. But I literally remember our voting precinct, the voters registration office was in another location, and there were literally lines wrapped around the courthouse. Maybe some of the lines that we've seen in other states so far with the early voting. Just imagine that it looks a lot worse than that. Right. They were trying to get in.
And I would definitely agree with that, Tammy. I mean, that was kind of my era. I think I'm a little bit older than Mandie. It was like
you're a little bit behind me.
If you are.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it on the news. I mean, I definitely remember that. That was the pivotal thing. Yeah. So, and I remember we actually had at my school a mock election going into that.
Okay, I love those.
Yeah, We did a mock primary, a mock runoff. Like, it was all of that.
Right.
So I think that, you know, definitely, you know, before social media, before the internet was even really widely popular at that point, we kind of heard about it on the news, you know, and definitely in our households with my parents talking, the mock elections at school. It just, you know, I guess it was a different form of social media back then.
Right.
So I'm
And there was no knocking on doors. You didn't have to beg people to get out there.
I know for that.
Yeah.
Well, I have a fun question for y'all since of what's going on this year. I'm gonna let Linda go first because I know she has to go to the convention. First things, Nicole is here.
Hello.
So please look at your chat for more resources and information, and we will be sending that in an updated email, you know, who to call about voting, Nick's website, location's website, all that stuff. But since it's Democratic Convention week and we have a total monster to defeat, I mean, he's
right.
Speaking from your vantage, from your particular, you know, community and age and where you are, what do you think turnout's going to look like in November from where you're sitting? And Linda, if you can go first real quick, because I know you got to go in a minute.
So I just also want to give a plug for, if you want to watch the convention, it's the next 4 nights, and the website is demconvention.com. You can go there and find out all kinds of information and ways to watch. You know, I'm hopeful. I feel like there's a groundswell of people who just want to go vote this man out, even if they're not in love with Joe Biden. I think Kamala Harris kind of energized some people a little bit recently, but I sense that there is this huge desire to overwhelmingly storm the voting booths and get this man out. I am hopeful that that's the case, and I'm hopeful that there's not enough, you know, problems with
shenanigans,
offices and stuff like that that we don't have, you know,
taking the election.
But look, I mean, I think the main thing is that we do have to remember they are going to try stuff, right? They're going to try to do things like cheat and whatever. And so the fact is we do have to get a ton of people out so that we can overwhelm whatever it is that they put up against us. We have to put more people out.
Yeah. And Joe has to visit all the electoral states.
Yeah, Tammy, what do you think is going to happen, at least up in Shreveport, in the fall? Because you have a crazy divided part of the state as well. What do you think is going to happen? Because you're going to have people going, like some of our coworkers are going to go out there so they can be first in line to vote for Trump.
That's exactly what it's going to be. And I'm prepared for that. Because you just see it all the time. However, with the electoral votes and the way things are, we still, I mean, as Linda was ending, and I was trying to say that, and Joe should make sure he visit all the states. I mean,
you think he has a chance in Louisiana?
I don't know.
You can be honest.
Hopeful, but not with what we dealt with a couple of months ago.
Oh my God, it was so bad.
So if that was an indication, then probably not. You know, it's just gonna.
Tammy and I are holding down the fort at the back of the chamber.
Yeah.
Preaching about stuff. But do you think turnout's going to be high?
I'm hopeful. You know, they always say it's low, but they always say it's, you know, high for presidential elections. So hopefully it will stay that way. And like I said, I think just for where we are now and the truth coming out daily, if people choose to hear it, and I hope they do, with as we even talked about the truth about tort reform, the truth about this virus, the truth about the pandemic committee that was what I was trying to say, disassembled. It should be time for a change, because even looking at where we are as a country compared to the others at this time, it doesn't feel good for our country, and it still goes back to the top, to our leader. So hopefully that will be enough to get them out, as well as us just reminding people we have to do this. We do have a voice, and your voice matters.
Yeah,
absolutely. Which is why you should fill out your census too. Nick, do you think the people you see every week and the people you hang out with are motivated to help at least try to do their part voting in the fall, knowing that our state is a little crazy, but we have a lot of local candidates on our ballot? Do you think people are motivated?
I think people are motivated Well, I could definitely speak for myself. I mean, this will be my first time voting since the John Kerry election, because I gave up all hope. And
I'm glad to have you back.
so
I was gonna say that.
if I'm one of the people that
Glad you're back.
if I'm back voting, I feel like, and I've always been one. I don't complain about the system. I just do what I have to do. And build how I have to build. But I also understand this affects other people. And then with the current climate with in our city, and I feel like me being a businessman and how things are shaping up with our economy right now, I definitely need to be more and more focused and cognitive of what's going on as far as in the political landscape. So now more than ever, I know if I can, I figure that other people are too. For sure.
Okay. And there's one
you
thing,
have a voice for those other people.
Yep.
Right. And that's something that people, I'm glad, are starting to realize and call each other out and say, just because this doesn't affect you or doesn't affect you today, it affects your friends and your neighbors, and it might affect you later. And I mean, it's so sick when people say that race doesn't, I don't care about that. Well, it might be you one day.
Right.
It might be you. So I'm glad to hear you recognize that.
I have a quick question. What do you tell the person that may be discouraged about voting just because they feel like the candidate they may want doesn't even have a chance in this state?
Good question.
What do you tell them to encourage them to still, fight the other fights, maybe, or something like that?
Very good question. I'll let you go, Mandie.
As an extremely progressive Democrat in a red state, it is very difficult sometimes to hold your nose and do things. Something that I've seen people talk about, people much wiser than me in recent years, talk about with voting is harm reduction. And I think it's a very good description of what we have to do sometimes. And that's just kind of the way most of our system works. Is one or the other. We do have an open primary system, but it's one or the other, or 1, 2, 3 of the others. And sometimes you just have to decide like which one is less worse, and that's painful often for many of us, especially when there's a big issue like reproductive rights or something similar that you feel
less of the two evils.
Yeah. And so sometimes you just have to choose the less bad option, and that should make people want to elect better candidates and get better candidates to run.
And I do want to add, the top of the ticket may not be your favorite, but there's always down ballot races.
Yes.
The local races are so important and affect our lives on a daily basis.
Yep.
And then finally, as far as if I look back at the 2016 election, even though Hillary Clinton did not win the Electoral College, knowing the fact that she won 3 million more, however many more votes that she won than Donald Trump, I think is significant for us to be able to say we're still the majority, right? So even though the Electoral College, which is a relic itself of our past, that
hopefully can change.
Yeah, I mean that's put into place. That goes back to slavery, right? So I mean we should be trying to update that anyway. But I mean the fact that we can say the majority of the country supported something different than is this man who is in the White House right now, I think is a really important point for us to continue to make until we can change those systems to better represent us.
And I would like to just add to that, and that's when it comes down to still reminding them that their vote counts. Still just saying, please vote, just not vote. That won't help us, but your voice is still heard with you pushing the lever. So it is important to ask them to, even though their candidate or the two of the lesser of the two evils are there, I would just say still encourage them to choose one. Because somebody's going to be in charge.
We've seen all kinds of local elections that have come down to like 6 votes. And with the one in Virginia that was won on a coin toss, it was a tie and they had to toss a coin or whatever. The local elections can be very tight.
Baton Rouge had a judicial election this weekend that I think was 27 votes or 26 votes.
Really?
Crazy.
What vote was that?
Foxworth and Alexander.
For what seat?
Judge.
It was
judge.
Yeah. I don't know what. What I'm gonna do, so I'm gonna ask Lakeisha a final question, and then I'm gonna get y'all to do your, last little roundup. about yourself. Lakeisha, what do you think turnout's going to be like? And then give us your brief 30-second on why it's so important to you, why it was so important for you and for your clients that you want to be a judge on family court. But first, turnout. What do you think turnout's going to be like?
I think turnout's going to be crazy. I think turnout is going to be kind of like what we saw in the Obama race, right? Now, to the extent that I
That
think,
would be nice.
right, to the extent that I think the numbers are going to be that high, I don't think they'll be that high, but I think that people are just as motivated for this presidential race as they were for that one. And so I'm hopeful. I think that a mixture of what we saw with the huge injustice with the Abrams gubernatorial race, I think is going to motivate people more than we have given them credit for. I think that they are tired of voter suppression. I think that they are in this fight with her. And she has committed to this not just being a Georgia issue. This is really a national issue. I certainly hope that she will take this fight to Florida, because that's another battleground with stealing races, but that's a whole nother story. But, you know, I think that people are much more motivated than we give them credit for. And I think that we're going to see very large turnout because I think that people, like I said, are just as much very motivated to see some change in the White House, whether they're successful or not. I think, you know, it's just about being able to do that. Definitely what I agree with is, as far as Linda said, and I was going to say, I think it's the down ballot races that we really need to encourage people to be more, involved with and just more educated about. Mandie, just in closing, you know, the reason that I'm in the family court race that I'm in is because I have a lot of clients who are really just crying out for change. It's just some things that they want to see different. They're kind of tired of doing things the same. And so to the extent that I have, you know, been in the fight with them in the courtroom, I also do, you know, my own voter education outreach to people, just explaining to them the importance of judicial races. I'm often met with the question, you know, why do people care about judicial races? Because they should. It's the same reason that they should care about legislative races, because quite frankly, all of the laws that they don't agree with as they relate to child support and child custody are laws that the judges don't enact. Those are laws that the legislators enact.
Yep.
And so my question to my clients when they complain about these things are, okay, well, who'd you vote for in the last legislative race? And then I always hear crickets, right? And then I have to explain to them why it is so important for them to, you know, become more engaged and get more involved. And so I think that the things that they think are not important, it's just really because of a lack of knowledge and not understanding how government is really intersectional. You know, you think that it's not affecting you, you know, having to be involved in these Senate races and legislative races, until you realize that they're the ones who actually determine how child support is calculated. Well, then it becomes an issue that's important to me, right? Because that's an everyday issue that affects me. So when I go before the court and I don't understand why my child support is $1,300 when I thought, you know, that maybe that was all I really made, then now I get it, right? Now I want to call Mandie's office and say, hey, I don't really think I like how child support is calculated.
Right. Well, Lakeisha, I'm glad you decided to run. You are running for similar reasons as I ran, which is you're like, you know what, I'm tired of this. Like, I'm going to try to do better than this, or different, or just different. Yep. And you know, anger is a good motivator. So I am glad you decided to do this, and I'm glad you were able to call in tonight.
Yes,
on a related note, Nick, thank you for calling, and Nicole wants me to remind you to tell everyone about your, you have a place that can offer safe, socially distanced events that are outside, and we need more of those places right now. So please tell us about your location.
So I have Culture Park. It's located 3000 Franklin Avenue, and the capacity is 1,200. So right now we're able to do some events, private small gatherings for 50 people. Also, if any meet or greets for like any political stuff. Me and Nicole is actually still in the works of planning another voter registration drive in enough time before the next election or the big election, because we've been doing it with the bikes, but we also want to do some stuff there since we have enough space there. But for anything, we've been booking, like small gathering parties as well as pop-ups and giving people a market to be able to sell a product and stuff like that.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone's looking for alternatives and outside space and ways to do things. So it's great to know that we know people that I can send them towards. Tammy. Oh, sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah.
One thing, and if anybody wants to come speak, talk about their business at on 1 hour rides on Tuesdays, you can reach out. We allow up to 2. I mean, even if we have 3, we'll let anybody speak. If you have something to say, get some information out, or if you're a candidate running for something, anything like that.
And that's Tuesday, and you start around 7:30.
Well, you start at we meet up at 7. So I usually let the speakers start at 7:30, and we meet up by the French Market right in front of Mint, the Jazz Mint, backside of El Gato Negro.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, it's really fun, and if you haven't gone, you should go for sure. So, I just want to make sure everyone has time to get out. Tammy, I miss you. I'm sure you miss me a lot. I'm sure you miss me a lot. If you have one wish, so we're probably going to have to go into session. If you had one wish for a special session, what would it be?
The topic, or
one bill that you just want done.
Oh, one bill. Oh God.
One thing.
You put me on the spot.
All right, I'll come back to you. I'm gonna come back to you. Think about it.
Okay.
Linda, I see you're about to go to the convention. Are there any people in particular this week that you want us to tune into?
It's gonna be good. Every night's gonna be great. And there's gonna be some. I'm just gonna say no one. I posted.
I'm choose favorites among my children.
I posted earlier today on Facebook and asked people. I told them I'd send them a Biden sticker if they could figure out who I wanted to see, and nobody guessed. But I'm excited for Cory Booker on Thursday night.
I do love him too.
Okay.
I love him too. Our senator from New Jersey.
He's gonna be his speech is gonna be good. Tune in.
Okay.
New Jersey. And I see Ted James is on, and Nicole is gonna try to unmute and unvideo him if he wants to. If he wants to jump in. I don't know if he's listening to me or on the phone or something.
Okay.
While we wait for him, Tammy, what do you want to see?
I'm on.
To be honest with you, and it wouldn't be. Is that Ted?
Hey, Tammy.
Hey, Ted.
Like I know.
Hey, Madam Judge.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, look at that shirt.
Make America great again.
Tammy was
I'm gonna have to get one with Linda and I on it to say make Louisiana Democratic Party great again.
We can do that. We can do that.
I like that.
Y'all, yeah. If y'all watched last time, Ted's running for state party chair. I gotta let people go watch the convention, but Ted, I just asked Tammy and she hasn't thought about it yet. If there's one bill you would want to pass through in our special session we're probably going to be called into, what would it be?
If we have time and we go in early, vote by mail, automatic vote by mail with no restrictions and open it back up. And I want to thank you for just being a champion on that issue. But
right.
We know how hard we have to fight to protect our democracy. And it's ironic. I was listening to Nick, and the fact that he talked about he hadn't been voting, and that's one of the reasons why I know myself and Linda are putting ourselves up for service to the party, because we have some responsibility in that as well. And us as Democrats, we got to work harder to give Nick and others reasons and to be excited about voting, because just saying, oh, people died for it, that's not working anymore, right? Reminding folks of the civil rights movement, that doesn't work with certain generations, and we have to get people excited and give them the reason to go out there and vote. That's something that's as I was listening to Nick, I'll tell you, brother, it's something that's heavy on my mind. I know it's heavy on Linda's and Mandie and Lakeisha and Tammy as well, to be out there and give a product. And as Democrats, we have to give a product and have people that are out there excited about getting involved in the process.
Okay.
That's perfect.
I agree with that. That would be one of the foremost. I mean, I know it would be too much to ask them to talk about their egg in the face tort reform, but not
Don't get me
necessarily
started.
not necessarily a bill, but honestly what comes to mind is just for once we could just come together to take care of the people of Louisiana. I don't know what that means, but at the end of the day, if this virus and this pandemic could have been the thing to really come together and show the people that we represent that that's what we're here to do and help and protect them, that would be the one that I would ask, of just really attending to the needs of the state of Louisiana, from economic to education to jobs, just a fairness. I know that's kind of big and probably far-fetched, but I'm still hopeful that we will come together on better issues where it really comes to representing everyone. That's going to happen within the next 3 years.
Awesome.
I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to come.
In closing, I'll close with, we had a Democratic call today, and Matt Willard brought up, which is also my goal, is we need to do something with housing.
Housing, yeah.
Long term, but definitely short term. We're going to have some eviction issues coming up. It's a financial problem, but it's also a problem of, we can give people money for now, but those jobs aren't coming back. They didn't make enough to begin with. $725 is not enough money. There's not enough childcare. It's a whole host of problems that start with, do you have a home to live in? So that would be my wish for something that could happen this year. But y'all, I love these calls. Y'all were a really great group. And I'm glad that Ted was able to call in at the last minute.
Yeah.
We need to get t-shirts with Ted and
I
Linda's
like that one.
on them. Put me on the back with a face mask. Okay.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate y'all. This was fun, and we're gonna send a wrap up to everyone with links. So if there's anything in particular you want me to send, otherwise the chat was kind of quiet, but it looks like we're closing in a second. But I'm glad for everyone who called in, and we'll probably do this in 2 or 3 weeks. So
thank you.
Go enjoy your Monday night.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Thank you. Good to see you all.
Bye everyone. Have a good night.
Okay, you too.